Hello all, and welcome to my first ever process video with commentary. In this video you will see the creation of my settling in piece while I provide commentary on the process of creating it. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. First, I begin by finding a reference image. This reference is from a wonderful book called The Flower Recipe Book. I knew I wanted to do something floral because watercolor flowers are fun and look great, and I wanted to work with a springy color palette. I settled on a bouquet of roses, lamb's ear, and asclepias. For this piece, I felt inspired by the movement in the beautiful bouquet to move from a more contained, structured feel into a looser, more open composition. To accomplish this, I measured an inch from the top of the paper and from the sides, and then taped fully across the top of the piece. Next, I applied shorter pieces of tape that didn't extend to the bottom of the paper. This way, I had a nice, sharp, square border at the top that opens up at the bottom. From there, I loosely drew in where I wanted the various floral elements to be. Once I was pleased with the general composition, I began putting in color with my Caran Neocolor IIs. A quick segue on the medium. These are wax pastels that draw on very similar to crayons, but can be activated with water to produce either a watercolor effect when activating drawn-on pastel, or an oil stick/oil pastel effect if you dip the pastel in water and draw with the end of it wet directly onto paper. For this piece, I applied the color as a wax pastel first and waited to activate it until the end for a watercolor effect. I started with the roses because I knew I wanted them to be a focal point of the piece and I wanted them to make up the right side of the composition. When putting down the color, I like to pack as many relevant colors into each section as possible. This allows for much more complex bouquets of color when I finally go back and activate the drawing with water. First, I like to put in the general value of the area I am about to color in, meaning the tint or shade with gray or black. Rather than putting in white, I leave those spaces open, similar to classic watercolor techniques. Once I have the general value in, I go back over with my colors. Often I will start with the most bold colors I can see that take up a small amount of real estate or that help define the shape of a petal or a section of the composition. This allows me to ensure that the color doesn't get overlooked and helps set up where the other colors of the petal or leaf need to go. It is a slow process of observing all the little, minute colors in the reference, but it helps me build up the richness and complexity that I want in the finished image. In the roses, while predominantly pink, I saw reds, oranges, purples, yellows, and even greens that I made sure to include as accents. Once the roses were fully drawn in, I moved on to the lamb's ear. The lamb's ear is what really gives the composition some movement and is the main element that breaks the border on the left side. In the lamb's ear, I again put in the relative value with grays and black, and then went in with blue purples, blue greens, some cool reds, and dark blues to flesh out the rich, round leaves. Once I had finished the first section of lamb's ear, I decided I wanted to change my composition away from the reference and what I had initially drawn in. I moved the placement of the asclepias from the top left corner to be more central within the flower grouping. This made for a more dynamic, asymmetric composition that fit with the theme of breaking the structured border. In addition to wanting a more dynamic, asymmetric composition, I began to think more about what the contrast between confined order and loose openness meant to me, especially at this time. As I worked on this piece, it came to represent what it means to be settled. When we imagine an ideal, relaxed state, I think a lot of people picture a lack of structure, at least from a work perspective. The freedom to do what you want when you want. You settle into a state of letting go. However, I often find that structure and order provide their own sense of comfort that curbs my anxieties. This contradiction in what it means to be settled is something I think a lot of people are experiencing during the current pandemic, and I wanted to capture that in this piece. Again,
With these Asclepias, I left the highlights blank and then went in with grays, black, and colors to provide depth and definition. Once I finished drawing in the flowers and leaves, it was time to go back with my brush and activate the colors with water. To maintain some of the definition within the individual elements, leaves, flowers, etc., I activated areas of similar color and value and then waited to return to adjacent areas of different color or value. As you can see, I continue to hop around when activating sections so that adjacent elements don't bleed into each other excessively. Sticking to similar colors and values also helps cut down on my need to clean the brush between activations.
The brush I'm using here is a Niji water brush. I highly recommend this brush for this process because I am able to store water in the handle of the brush and squeeze it to release more water into the brush itself. This allows me to easily maintain and adjust the water level while I'm working.
With the flowers fully put in, it was time to tackle the background. To further communicate the order and structure of the top section of the composition, I decided to draw stacked shapes of color in the background. I made sure to use colors from the flowers and leaves to tie it all together. I didn't end up liking how the shapes looked. They made the background too busy. To help gel the background and maintain hints of the shapes and colors, I drew with dark gray over all the shapes and then activated it with water. This created a veil-like appearance that successfully blended the shapes without totally covering them up. Keeping up with the piece's theme, rather than drawing in shapes in the relaxed bottom half, I drew in abstract patches that I then covered with the same dark gray as on top. I tried to give the impression of the background flowing out of its confinements, spreading out with the floral arrangement. With all of the background painted in, I went back over with soft, oil, and wax pastels to put in additional details. I looked for sections that lacked contrast or definition and carefully put in marks. And that's it! Thank you for helping to support the creation of my art. I hope this has been a revealing look at my process and has inspired you to create some art of your own. Until next time, stay safe and healthy. Bye.